As Apex Legends continues to grow, some players are able to adapt more quickly and thrive in this fast-paced environment, while others struggle to find their footing and make a number of mistakes that can cost them their games. So here are 10 common mistakes that nearly every player makes while playing Apex Legends. Number 1, not adapting to the situation. Many players severely underestimate how important this is. In Apex, the situation on the battlefield is constantly changing. Not only will the situations be different throughout each game, but often the circumstances within a fight will change rapidly. You need to be able to adapt to these changes and adjust your strategy accordingly. Whether it's switching up your weapons, using your abilities in new ways that surprise and overwhelm your opponents, or just simply changing your approach on the fly. One simple attribute players can develop to improve this aspect is just start to become way more alert and aware throughout each game. Staying flexible and adaptable is key to your success in Apex Legends. Number 2, not keeping an eye on the map. The map in Apex is full of valuable information if you learn to utilize it, from the location of enemy teams to where loot spawns and where it does not, as well as the next circle location. Well, the map should play a role in how you go about strategizing and planning your decisions throughout each match. Having a good understanding of the layout and features of the map can give players a huge advantage in a number of ways. For example, players with good map awareness are way more likely to be able to predict the movements of their enemies and anticipate potential ambush points. They may also be able to take advantage of things like high ground, cover, and other environmental features to gain this advantage in combat. By ignoring the map or forgetting the layouts of the buildings that you venture in, you're depriving yourself of valuable intel that could help you make smarter decisions, not only in that game, but also your future games. Number 3, failing to properly manage their inventory. Now, managing your inventory effectively is essential in a game like Apex Legends. You need to constantly assess what you have, what you need, and make sure you're carrying the right weapons and items for each situation. Your inventory management will vary game to game because of what you're able to find, what backpack size you might have, and what your overall game plan is. However, there are some general tips that I recommend. And first is going to be to try to run 2 guns that are not in the exact same class as one another. For example, if you're going to use a Volt, I wouldn't have another SMG or even a shotgun as your secondary. And this same thing can apply for assault rifles too. So you want to have different weapons that can serve different purposes for the different types of fights you'll get into, close range, mid range, or long range. Another tip is to make sure you're carrying enough shields, but not too many health meds. I see this all the time in coaching sessions, but I recommend 8 to 12 cells, 2 to 6 shield batteries, 4 syringes, and 2 medkits. Now, these are just ideal numbers to strive for. It's heavily contingent on your backpack size and what you're able to find. But remember, small heals stack in 4s and big heals stack in 2s. Top off on them if the backpack slot is already being used. If you're holding 2 cells, you can hold 4. If you're holding 1 battery and you come across another, you can hold 2. It's taking up the exact same amount of space. So be smart with your inventory. Number 4, not using your Legends abilities effectively. I know it sounds fairly obvious, but this is a common mistake many players make with different types of legends. See, each legend in Apex has unique abilities that can turn the tide of battle in your favor. However, these abilities are only useful if you know how and when to use them. Make sure you understand the strengths and limitations of your Legends kit and try to use them wisely. Coordinating your Legends abilities with your teammates when you may be trying to push an enemy or retreat from one can be crucial for success. Now, I understand it's going to be extremely hard to pull this off if you're solo queuing with randoms, but regardless, if you play with randoms or you play with some friends, these are still principles that you'll want to strive for. Another thing too is if you're fairly new or recently returning to Apex, make sure you at least understand what all of the legends can do. I'm not saying you need to play and master each and every one of them, but you want to know what each legend's potential is when you're going up against them. Otherwise, if you don't do this, I assume you'll be dying in a lot of preventable ways if you just understood what each legend is capable of in different moments. Some Legends abilities can really change the scope of a fight. Apex's initial goal was to have abilities affect only 10 to 20% of the gameplay, but that isn't really the case in Season 15. There are significant abilities that can fully tilt the fight in your favor if used correctly and at the right time, so keep this in mind. Number 5, not paying attention to the circle. While this is similar to number 2 where I discussed map awareness, the circle in Apex is a constantly shrinking safe zone that forces players to move and engage with one another. Failing to pay attention to the circle can put you in a dangerous position, as you could find yourself caught outside of it and either vulnerable to attacks or straight up dying to the zone damage. Unless players have prior Battle Royale experience before coming over to Apex, they often deal with the circle on a much more reactive level, and this will only take you so far. It's much better to become familiar with the different circle locations that will reoccur on each map and be preemptive at times to rotate into the circle before it's too late. There's a lot of room for error when players rely too heavily on rotating late, so I suggest you get used to understanding where circles will pull and how to get into that safe location sooner. Having a positional advantage over your opponents can sometimes be the biggest difference maker in a fight. Number 6. Getting too aggressive. While it's important to be proactive and take the fight to the enemy, getting too aggressive can be a mistake at times. See, in Apex, overconfidence can lead to reckless behavior and costly mistakes. Be careful not to let your aggression get the better of you. Some tangible examples of players letting this happen could be rushing the enemy without any consideration of the full enemy's team's whereabouts. This is also known as tunnel vision. Remember, Apex is a team game, meaning nearly every fight, you're not just fighting one person. It could be 2 or usually 3. Another example of being reckless could be what's known as over-peaking. This is when you are engaging with an opponent and you may trade some damage back and forth with one another, but perhaps you took more damage than you dealt, and then you re-peak them. They are still aiming down their sights at you and knock you because you got greedy and tried to re-peak. Now I want to be clear here, re-peaking as a whole isn't always a bad thing. It definitely has its use cases, but you want to learn the nuances of it as you play this game. If you're re-peaking on low health constantly only to be getting knocked, then an assessment of your gameplay is needed. There will be some times where re-peaking can be beneficial. If you think your opponent is going to push you in the open, away from their cover while you're still utilizing yours, and you're going to make this unpredictable move to try to shoot them while they're coming out in the open. This could work at times. But as I said, if you're dying a lot as a result of re-peaking, then you're not doing this correctly. Number 7, not going for armor swaps when you can. This is something that plagues every player as they are learning to progress in Apex. Every time there is a full kill in Apex, there will be a death box. And you may be thinking, yeah, duh, I know this. But what I bet you're often forgetting is that death box can have the keys to the quickest reset possible, armor swapping. Often in Apex, you will fight one team, and if you're lucky to win that, very shortly after, you will be getting third-partied by another team. Sometimes you may not have 5 seconds to use a shield battery. Other times, you may not even have shield batteries, and you have to try to pop 3 or 4 cells to get back to being full. Time is of the essence here, so remembering what armor swaps are where and how quickly you can snatch one is a key to improving fast in this game. The unfortunate aspect to this is there's really no practice for it except in live matches. There's no way to get used to looting a death box and quickly grabbing an armor swap other than just doing it when it needs to happen. If I take this tip a step further, it's to remember which armor swaps were already taken by your squad mates. Sometimes you may not be aware of this info, but other times, if you pay close enough attention to it, you will know. Don't bother wasting time going back into a death box looking for an armor swap if you should know your teammate already got it. Number 8, not staying hidden and stealthy at the right times. While it's important to be proactive and take the fight to the enemy, it's also important to be sneaky and avoid being detected in certain moments. In Apex, being stealthy can give you the element of surprise and allow you to take out enemies before they even know you're there. But it can also do more than that. It can allow for you to take less damage during these fights. Now, I want to be clear here. I'm not suggesting you rat in a corner as you try to sneak attack your enemy when they walk by. It's not like that. It's more like learn when and where to posture up and to provide presence and engage with your enemy. And on the flip side, understand when providing presence could be detrimental and just cause your death. There's a time and a place for everything in Apex. Number 9. Not communicating properly with your team. In Apex, communication is key. Without proper coordination, your team will struggle to make smart decisions and execute effective strategies. Even if you prefer to play solo, it's important to at least let your teammates know where you are and what you're doing. This begins to really affect how games are played as you progress up the ranks, and even in pubs where skill-based matchmaking is cranked to the max these days. Some of you may prefer not to talk if you're solo queuing, and I can understand that. However, I'd still be heavily using the pinging system and mentioning any crucial bits of info to my teammates when I think it's necessary. You also want to be aware of the fact that if you're not communicating, but others on your team are, you should be developing and using solid listening skills as well. This right here is actually such an underrated aspect to a great player in Apex. Learning to listen to your squad mates about what's being said can make a huge difference as you progress up the ranks in Apex. Number 10, bad drops. Whether it's landing too hot, landing late onto other teams who already have found weapons, or just straight up landing at places that don't spawn enough loot for a full team. I wish I could really see some statistics from Apex to see how many people are dying off drop in some of the dumbest ways possible, but I'm not privy to that information. Now, to be frank, this whole point could deserve an entire 8-minute segment, but I'll try to keep it brief. When dropping, you want to be free looking around to establish how many teams are landing with you at whatever POI you're planning to go to. If it's more than one other team coming with you, then you should strategically place your landing around where you think you can avoid being sandwiched by multiple teams, or where you at least can avoid fighting first, setting up an opportunity for the other team to easily third party. You're also going to want to be familiar with where loot does and does not spawn at each location. If you're landing and then presumably going to run into an enemy team within 20 seconds, you cannot afford to be wasting time running around areas or sections of that POI that don't spawn any loot. And no matter how obvious this one or the other 9 mistakes sound, I can confidently say every player in Apex, including myself at times, is making these mistakes. Whether it's big or small, it really boils down to how many of the mistakes they are making and to what degree. So if you found this video helpful, but you want to learn about 13 things you should never do in Apex, well, I covered it all in this video here. Check it out next. Thanks for watching. Peace.